On PM Express tonight, a big debate happening today, the energy sector debate, comparing the records of the NDC and the NPP. The NDC today held a forum on energy that in essence try to compare these two governments and what they've done. One of the things they've said, aligning the achievements in this particular sector. One of them is they say they repositioned Boston Tor to be effective. They also said they secured 2 million barrels of Ghana's crude oil from the 10 fields, and they actually stated that it's because of their policies that, fields like 10 and Sankofa came on, and they take credit for that. Or also, they talked about the gas master plan, which they say led to the development of the gas processing plant at the trouble, among other things that they introduced. Now, and they also accuse government of eroding the gains in the energy sector. They say $15 billion dollar debt has been built over the period because they believe government was not managing this particular sector properly. Describes the renegotiated deals, in some of the sectors. They talk about 141 billion accrued from the petroleum sector that they believe the government hasn't used appropriately, because they compare the amounts, the revenues accrued to this government to what they had around the time that they were in power, and they put their figure around 70 billion accruing from the revenues that they managed to get from the oil sector. They put the current government's revenues from the sector at 141 billion, and they say this hasn't been managed properly, and there's nothing to show for the monies that this government had made from the sector. We'll be looking at some of the key things they've talked about, with threats already being issued tonight to managers of the sector, the GMPC, that if the NDC comes to power, people will face severe sanctions because of deals that were made under this current government. We'll be interrogating some of the key issues when we return from this break. You're live on PM Express. My guest in the studio is the former Deputy Energy Minister, Mr. John Jinapor. He's also Member of Parliament for Yape Kusugu. I was in his constituency over the Christmas period, traveling to Mali. You have a nice constituency. Anytime I pass there,
you should have stopped. I was there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was in the constituency for Christmas.
I had a nice time. It was very good. I mean, I spent a whole week traveling up and down that stretch. Also with me is Mr. Kojo Poku, is the CEO of Gas of Oil. He's also an energy analyst. We'll be joined by Nana Damwa, who speaks for the Energy Ministry shortly, as we begin to look at the issues that the minority had put forward today. So, Mr. Janapo, let's start with the big picture. You say, when it comes to the oil revenues, the NPP government has far more revenue than you had in the time that you were in office, and you had concerns with the way they've utilized the funds. What's the argument there?
No, that's a factual accuracy. I mean, as for facts, they are facts. Indeed, all the figures I churn out, I got them from PIAC, from the Bank of Ghana, because the annual Petroleum Reconciliation report is generated by the Bank of Ghana. And then PIAC would also do its work and also generate its report. The Minister of Finance also appears before Parliament and also produces some report. And so these are figures that are not in doubt at all. And as we speak, I can give you the yearly figures.
Please.
For instance, in 2016, I think it's 920. It moved to, I think, 2.3 billion. It moved to about 4 billion, 5 billion. And then the 2020 budget, the minister projects that he will get about 8.9 billion. So it's not as if John Jinapor has generated his own figures. All these are figures from statutory bodies. I had to do some research with Statistical Service, with the Auditor General, with PIAC, with Bank of Ghana, with the Ministry of Finance, and all those agencies that generate the primary source of data. Because data is data, and facts are facts. Facts are sacrosanct. You cannot have different sets of facts. We can have the facts and interpret it differently. As for the facts, that's the raw fact. And the fact is that John Mahama got about $6 billion in the 4 years. President Akufo-Addo is scheduled to get about 20 billion cedis.
In 4 years?
Talking of 6 billion and 20 billion in 4 years.
So obviously because the crude oil prices have gone up since
that is
time.
true. And the volumes have also gone up. So it's normally total revenue is a matter of price and quantity. You can have the same quantity. If the price go up, you have more total revenue. If your quantity is the same and the price go up, or the price is the same and quantity goes up, I'm saying that total revenue is a function of price and quantity. And so the NPP is enjoying very good prices and very good quantities. When I checked the 2018, they are doing about 160,000 barrels per day. And the price was quite high. I think about $60, $70 thereabout. And so when you check, the figures are there. And these are outturns. I'm not talking of projections. And so clearly, they're receiving so much money. And it's not a matter of debate.
But your fundamental issue was that, yes, they're making more, but they're not, the way they're using it is what you took issue. You said in the 2018 financial year, only 49% of the ABFA expenditure was used for capital expenditure, while 51% was utilized for supply of goods and services. And you see a clear violation of the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. How is that a violation of the Petroleum Management Act?
Just read the PIAC report of 2017, 2018, and then 2019. We're waiting for the 2019. Because normally after the year is ended, it takes about 3 months for them to gather data and then produce that. And PIAC indicates that less than 50% of petroleum revenues were spent on capital expenditure. In our national accounting system, with the expenditure line, you have goods and services, you have compensation, and then you have CAPEX. That's capital expenditure. And the Petroleum Revenue Management Act states that you must spend the money on critical investment, and that in the absence of the priority projects, I think every 3 years the minister has the right to select 4 priority projects. And so in education, you will see something like physical infrastructure and something. I'll get that. But when you look at it, 97% of that was spent on goods and services. And my point is that if you spend 90% of your revenues on goods and services to the detriment of capital expenditure, you are not building the base of the economy.
But it's not a violation of the law.
We hold the view that it's a violation of the Petroleum
Which part of the law? I have the law.
I'll quote it for you.
Since you make the point, I've been trying to read it. I cannot find it in there.
I just opened the PRMA, but I'll check it for you. And PIAC, if you want to speak to Dr. Mantiel, he maintains that that is not proper. No, and it's an interpretation from all of us.
Proper is different from it's a violation. Because you were very specific about this is a violation of the Petroleum Management Revenue Law. Because I see the law here, and it talks about where the long-term national development plan approved by Parliament is not in place, the spending of petroleum revenue within the budget shall give priority to, but not limited to, programs or activities related to, and it lists a whole list of areas.
No, you have to go to the government. Go to the section of the ABFA. I'll go there right now. Whilst Kojo is addressing, I'll go to the section.
And it lists the priority areas. It lists the priority areas that the government is allowed to do every 3 years in review.
Now check the aspect. The petroleum revenue goes into the holding account, net of our equity interest and participating. Then out of that, part goes to the stabilization fund, part goes to the heritage, and then ABFA, and then PIAC. The aspect of the ABFA, I'll just check it for you. I mean, records are records.
I mean, from what I read, this is a case of prioritization. It's a government, and the law allows any government to choose what a priority area is.
Thank you. So that even brings us to the core. That what I'm saying is that, unlike the NDC, that spent a lot on infrastructure, that spent a lot on capital expenditure.
But that's your priority.
Yes, and so we can debate that.
Yeah, but why do you want to make it? They have chosen not to focus on.
No, I'll look for that section. Don't worry. Don't let us. I'll get there. And I'll read it for you. But I'm saying that when you do that, for instance, if you look at the figures that are churned out, over the past 4 years, we spent about 4% as a percentage of GDP on capital expenditure. The NPP spent about 1.4% as a percentage of GDP. When you do that, and in any growth model, take the solo growth model, take whatever growth, and that's what you're seeing. So 3.9, 3.9, 4, 4.6, then NPP, 2017, 3.1, 1.6, and 1.5. Then if you go to the next page, then you begin to see the outturns. You will see the outturns. So, no, the next one, you will see the outturns. And the outturns tells you what really happens in terms of what you are achieving. And so if you look at something like construction, construction was growing at 8% during our time. It's now growing at negative 8%. Electricity assets was about 4%. Today it's 0.5%, less than 1%. Electricity, the whole sector, grew about 17% in 2016. Today it's growing at 1%. Even the banking sector grew at about 14%. Today it's doing 12%. If you take the manufacturing sector, we grew at about 7.9%. I'll check the figures. Today we are doing about 6.5%. And so if you tilt your expenditure on only goods and services, and you don't see a commensurate expenditure on capital expenditure, eventually you begin to see the negative results that we are seeing. And despite the fact that we are receiving all these revenues, the cedi is not doing well. And the cedi is a function of two major things: your exports and your imports. And then more importantly, the rate of inflation. In calculating the rate of depreciation, two main components that feature has to do with the inflation and your exports and imports. Because you import more, then, but if you look at our trade balance, petroleum revenues alone, net export of about 1.7 billion. But when you look at the current account, the negative is astonishing. And so that tells you that there's a mismatch. And it's because of the way we are spending. We are not spending on the priority areas. But finally,
are you sure?
Finally, listen, 2020, go and check Appendix 6 of the budget. And I'm referring to Appendix 6. Free SHS cost us about 2.4 billion. Out of that 2.4 billion, we are not funding it from petroleum resources. We are funding it from loans that we are borrowing from the Eurobond. The Eurobond we paid over 30 years. We are using 2.5 billion cedis of that to fund free SHS. So to even say that you are using oil revenue to fund that, take agriculture. They've launched, what's the program for agriculture?
The Planting for Food.
Planting for Food. Agriculture is growing at 2.4%, less than even what happened in 2016. And these are figures from the budget. Look, every figure I'm quoting is from the finance minister's budget. I'm not generating figures. And that's why I threw a challenge that Joy FM, I'm pleading with you, check the debt level. In 2016, the debt level was 120 billion and not 122 as Dr. Bamia is quoting. Because the Auditor General is mandated under the Constitution to determine our debt levels. When you finish with the figures, the Auditor General will then do an audit and validate the figures. The Auditor General is validated that the figure is 120. And yet they are using a figure of 122. When we asked them, you know what they told us? They told us that they used the March exchange rate. You cannot take December 2016 figure and use March exchange rate, change the dollar into cedi, and say the debt level is 122. That defies economics. That defies statistics. You cannot do that.
Let me bring in Kojopuku on this question about how the revenues have been used. Would you get his argument? And I'll bring in shortly the spokesperson for the ministry.
I hope Nana Damwa does justice and refutes a lot of the things my brother John has said. But let me just say something and let all Ghanaians understand something. Look, the oil revenue is money that accrued to government through the sale of our crude oil. Yeah. That money goes into an account. Now, when that money goes through an account, I don't think the impression my brother John is trying to put across is that all the money that has accrued in that account, there are two gentlemen with a backpack that goes withdraw that money and go home with it. That is not the case. It is money that comes to an account. There's a law, which is the Petroleum Management Act, Revenue Management Act, that stipulates what goes into the Heritage Fund, Stabilization Fund, how much money is taken from that oil revenue is given to GMPC to pay for their their cash calls and for their GMPC operations. And the rest of the money goes into the consolidated fund, which is now used for government expenditure. Now, like you clearly said, it's a case of priority and government policy. The NDC believed in building overheads and infrastructure that Ghanaians can see. NPP believes that they want to invest in the people and clear indebtedness that existed that they came to meet. Now, maybe facts mean something. Maybe facts mean something. Budget upon budget, we've all been told how much the legacy debt in Get Fund was, NHIL, the road sector. All those debts were there. They were not imaginary. People were owed. This government has come and said that, look, over the last 3 years, we have paid out all the debt in these sectors. We've not had anybody from the NDC come to refute that. Well, that is, I'm not, listen, don't ask me that question. I'm just telling you what they've said. And they have said that they've paid the indebtedness in the Get Fund. They've paid the indebtedness in the NHIL. They've paid the indebtedness to some of the road contractors. Now, nobody has stood in the House of Parliament and refuted that when the minister read his budget. Because when the minister reads his budget, it's debated. And the monies they have paid is made available to you in Parliament, and you see how much they've paid. They told you how much indebtedness they met. You never refuted that they didn't make that indebtedness. They've told you over the last 3 years how much money they've paid towards this indebtedness and cleared all this indebtedness. So the monies that they have received, debt they have incurred, money they've taken from the road shows for Eurobond and all the bonds they have raised. Every year they come to Parliament and give you a big document how they spent that money, and every penny is accounted for. Now you keep talking about PIAC. For me, I think PIAC is an indictment on civil servants, not politicians, because from 2014 to date, every year PIAC has had a problem with how we spent our oil revenue. Yeah. In 2017 report for 2016, you heard when they said they went to the north and most of the projects were not even there. Yeah. So PIAC indictment, for me, it's the civil servants at Ministry of Finance who don't really do their work well. Because in an instance, there was money that was spent, and when the money is not fully spent, it's supposed to be returned to the ABFA. Yeah. The money was not returned, it was misappropriated and used for something else. It does not mean that somebody has embezzled the money. So it's clear. Whether somebody is supposed to use the money for infrastructure and a person used for buying beds, chairs for students to sit on, to buying, building dormitories and providing books, textbooks, uniforms for kids to go to school. You might not agree to that. You might not feel it's a good use of our oil revenue. But to the average Ghanaian, let them be the judge. Now, I mean, the challenge to the NDC and the NPP is that there's 2020 election coming. Go and make your campaign that we NDC, we build Dubai overhead at Circle. NDC, NPP buys you school uniform and pays your kids' school fees. Which one would you want to vote for? Let the Ghanaians, let us decide. But for me, it is the NDC's view that they want to build huge mega infrastructure that Ghanaians can see. NPP is of the view that we want to invest in kids' future. We want to now pay school fees for kids so that the more brower can take their kid to school and invest in the children's education. You might not agree with that, but it doesn't make it wrong. For me, that is the position.
Have you found the relevant provisions?
Yeah, let me read that for you. Fortunately, I took a screenshot whilst I was working, and I put that in yellow. For any financial year, a minimum of 70% of the annual budgeting funding amount shall be used for public investment expenditures consistent with the long-term national development plan or with subsection 3. That's what it says. It's clear.
Read that again.
That for any financial year, a minimum of 70% of the ABFA, just to shorten it, amount, and you can look at it, shall be used for public investment expenditures.
So what public investment expenditure is what you disagree with the NPP.
But just a second, public investment expenditure doesn't mean necessarily capital expenditure.
Investment expenditure is a multi-year expenditure. Check that. It's simple.
Well, that's fine. But just a second.
I beg you.
Let's fact check that a bit, because I just pulled up, and this is a report that you should have, the 2018 Petroleum Annual Report from the Finance Ministry, and it talks about the ABFA, what the monies were used for and allocations, right? Yes. It says an amount of 1.5 billion was programmed, right? 2018. The amount is made up of 463 million, right?
2018. Speak up
for goods and services. Yes. So that's your argument. But it doesn't finish. It says 1 billion capital expenditure
You are talking of programmed ABFA.
Yes, programmed.
Go to the outcomes.
Which was what it was actually used for.
Don't go to program.
So what he's saying that what is actually used for is not what they actually programmed to use.
So you're saying that there's a discrepancy between what they program and what they actually use the money for?
They programmed to give every constituency $1 million. In 2018, they ended up giving $46,000, less than 5% of that amount. I have the outcomes here.
Pull that up because
for me, it's
can I deal with this issue?
Okay, go ahead.
I beg you.
Go ahead.
You've talked about NHIS and all that. I wish you had given us figures.
Yeah.
But that has nothing to do with petroleum revenues.
Yeah.
What does NHIS, Get Fund, Road Fund got to do with petroleum revenues? On the contrary, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2 billion cedis of road fund monies were not released. And check it. It's in the report. I think that we should take time and read these reports. Now, the issue of building of schools and building of whatever, it's not a matter of opinion. It's a matter of the real issues on the ground. And if you give me those things, for instance, you talked about he decides that, look, we program to do capital expenditure. We've decided rather to do goods and services. It's against the law. The Public Financial Management Act says that virement can only be done when you can move revenues from goods and services to capital expenditure. You cannot move monies from capital expenditure to goods and services. In the Public Financial Management Act, which is the latest financial law, which really regulates it, Act 921 of 2016, talks about virement. And if you open it, just go to search and click virement. Virement says that you can take monies from goods and services and apply to capital expenditure. But you can't take it from capital expenditure and apply to goods and services. So it's not a matter of 2020 elections. I mean, it's a matter of following what the law says.
But Evans, can I come in? Look, let's be clear. Let's not make it look like there's embezzlement of money. No, let's be clear. Because when you raise that, monies were supposed to be used for this and it wasn't used for that, it's been misappropriated, people start thinking that, the government has embezzled money. It's not about embezzlement. It's about money being used for things that the law, according to the way it's put, is not being used for. But when you're a government and you are caught in a situation where you have no money, and I've always said that, look, for me, open and frank communication with people that vote government into power is the best thing that we don't have in any government in Ghana. You come into government and you have problems. Tell Ghanaians your problems you have. But sometimes, like the president said, he was not voted in to complain. So maybe that's his way of running the government, where he tried to deal with the problem and not complain. But for me, if I'm president, I always tell Ghanaians what is going on. When you come and you meet a certain situation, you tell Ghanaians the situation you met and how you are solving the problem. And they will understand how some of these things that we are talking. He keeps saying that revenue in 2018, 2019, road fund money was not used, was not released. Now, in 2016, 2015, the government of the day went to UBA and collateralized a road fund for a period of more than 5 years, so that they took money upfront from UBA and used that money to spend, so that in the next 5 years, all road fund money that comes in is spent ahead of time.
Oh, please.
My brother, go and find out.
But all road fund revenue.
Yes. And the law,
but it was collateralized.
They have to come back to parliament to change the law.
No, but the entire thing.
The entire fund
was
they have to come back to parliament to change the law.
Government could not access funds from the road fund.
Thank you. They collateralized the money. So don't sit here and say that government didn't release money when you collateralized the money before you left. So how can you say that?
He has an explanation.
It's completely wrong. Please read the reports.
Which
that
reports?
Money was because of capping and realignment.
Which capping?
You don't know that there's a law called capping.
But the fundamental point is that there was a collateral that was placed.
Did you collateralize road fund in 2016?
Let me answer the question.
There was a facility taken
from UBA
to do road fund projects. And a percentage of the road fund levy was supposed to pay for that. Just like you are talking of education. This government has borrowed $1.5 billion. And they've used a percentage of the road fund levy to collateralize for that. That is normal.
No, but that's the point it's making, that the road fund itself was a collateral for that particular loan. And the government could not access the money because it was locked into a collateral system.
No, that's false.
Why is that?
And I'm telling you that is false. I have with me here the ESLA revenue reports, 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019.
We're talking about road fund, not ESLA.
You don't even know that the road fund levy comes from the ESLA levy.
No. Let's talk about road fund. No, a percent comes from petroleum. When we pay for, we get percent from road fund from there. When we do toll, we get percent from there. What I'm saying is that in 2016,
listen to me.
The NDC changed the law.
I'm saying that
so
the
that
road fund levy is a percentage of the energy sector levies. The energy sector levies has about 4 different components. One of them is the road fund levy. When you buy petrol, when you buy diesel, when you buy LPG, that amount goes into the energy sector levies account. And in the energy sector levies account report, the report to tell you how much was collected under the road fund, how much was expended. And I'm saying that in that report, because of capping and realignment, about 2 billion has been taken for other non-road related expenditure.
Under your watch?
Under the NPP, not under our watch.
But that again was the NPP's accusations against your government, that when the road fund was collateralized, it wasn't used for purposes that were in fact specified under the law that regulates that particular.
Which law does that breach? Let them tell us.
Let me bring in Nana Damwa. Nana Damwa joins us on the line now. Nana Damwa is a spokesperson for the Energy Ministry. Mr. Damwa, let's start with the point made by the minority today, that the huge amounts, historic amounts they put it at some 141 billion cedis that the government had made over the period had been used significantly. More than 50% of that is going to goods and services. They say that is a violation of the petroleum management law. What's your reaction to that?
Thank you very much, Evans. Good evening to you. Good evening to your viewers as well. Significantly, Evans, I had limited time at following the minority and the program that they organized. But may I ask that beyond the say-so of the speaker at the time, were they able to provide any evidence to suggest that indeed the allegation that they were making, that more than 50% of the money had been spent on goods and services, was indeed true?
Let me read it for you.
Mr. Jonapo is here. He wants to read you his evidence. Yes.
I refer to the PIAC report. And
which of them is this?
This is the 2018, January to December 2018. And please listen to me. 98.75% of ABFA disbursement to the education priority, and they called it education. They added capex and goods and services. But when you break capex and goods and services, 98.75% of the disbursement went to education, which went into education priority areas, went into the free senior high school program.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that of the total amount that went to education for both capital expenditure and goods and services, 98.75 directly went into goods and services. 98.75.
I'm not sure that
of maybe disbursement today. Just let me read that again, just for clarity, because I pulled it up myself.
Yeah.
So 98.7, because I mean even here there's a discrepancy because I see 97 written in words. You see that?
No problem. You read it.
And then there's 98 of the ABFA disbursement to the education priority area went into free senior high school program. But does that suggest that? But doesn't suggest that they are not spending in capital?
What does VSHS do? Look at the items. Which one of them is capital expenditure? When we talk of goods and services, these are consumables, goods or purchases that you make and consume it within 1 year. That is goods and services.
Yeah.
Capex is when you do multi-year.
Let's hear from you. Yeah. Yes, Mr. Damwa.
Okay. Now, the sad part about it is that there was a general statement that was made that, if I'm right, and correct me, feel free to correct me, more than 50% of the revenues, historic revenues, are
yeah. Can I read you what they exactly said on that, so that it helps the conversation. So the point they made, to be specific, says, for instance, in the 2018 financial year, only 49% of the ABFA expenditure was used for capital expenditure, whilst 51% was utilized for the supply of goods and services, a clear violation of the Petroleum Revenue Management Act.
And please go to 23, paragraph 23
so
of the PIAC report.
But let him respond. He wanted clarity on that. That's
23.
Yes, Mr. Dama. But let him respond.
Why is he respond? Just go to 23.
Now, what I was expecting him to read out was something that gave credence to this allegation. 23. What he has read so far suggests that some allocation was made to the ABFA. Now, as out of the amount that was given to the ABFA, there was an amount that was given to the education priority. So out of the amount of money that was given to education priority, you have those figures there. But my point again exactly is that they haven't been able to give you any evidence, and he's in the studio. He's not been able to give you any evidence to back up any of the...
So he points to, Mr. Dama, he points to the 2018 PIAC report, paragraph 23, which says, and I'm quoting, in the 2018 financial year, only 49% of the utilized ABFA was used for capital expenditure, less than 70% stipulated in the APRMA.
No, PRMA.
In the PRMA.
Yes.
51% was utilized for the supply of goods and services. So the PIAC...
So let's all admit that perhaps 2018 was an aberration. Now, the statement they made suggests that 2017, 2018, 2019, same happened. They said historic funds that have been gotten were, in essence, misutilized. And I am saying that I would have loved for them to have been able to give any evidence to back up these claims that they were making. Even the point I'm trying to make to you is that what has happened...
You don't find the PIAC report's evidence enough?
I'm saying that what they've been able to do is bring 1 year out of 3. And if, for example, they've gone to the 2018 PIAC report, then definitely the 2017 PIAC report existed before the 2018. So if they wanted to supply evidence to state clearly and categorically beyond, reasonable doubt that what they were saying was true, then perhaps this seems to be a lone walker. But may I state that what they have done is just to mount a political platform and have, accuse the government of the day of having done a lot of things. In a sense, the substantiated elements of what they have done are very little, if there is any at all. What they have just done is create a platform for themselves to enable them attack the government and attack the government sometimes needlessly. May I, however, also suggest to them that I would have been very happy, for example, if they had used that platform to explain to the people of Ghana how come they have saddled us with a debt of about $500 million every year in excess capacity payments that is ongoing. I would have been very happy, for example, for them to have told the people of Ghana what their strategy was when they were signing those PPAs, and by PPA I refer to the power purchase agreements, because indeed there should have been some strategy. They claim that the current government does not understand what their strategy was. No challenge. Therefore, it was a golden opportunity to redeem yourself before the people of Ghana. I didn't hear any such thing. I haven't heard any such justification. I've just finished being on a program with Mr. Edward Bauer. The reasons he gave for all of those PPAs were that, one, we should give them to Valco and the others. They know very well that years at peak, Valco may consume about 540 megawatts of electricity. However, at the current price of electricity in this country, that is not sustainable. Valco cannot compete on the world market. I am not sure that Mr. Jenapo may want to suggest that we should give Valco subsidies again, bearing in mind that we are coming from an era where subsidies have created a legacy debt for us, and we are now using various means for which we're trying to pay, including ESLA. So if that was their plan, then that was ill thought through. they also make the allegation that, and indeed the fact that 40% of the people of Ghana thereby do not have access to electricity. But even if the 85 or so percent of people in this country that have access to electricity is utilizing about 2,900 megawatts of electricity at peak, then how do you expect that the remaining 15%, when hooked onto electricity, would magically utilize about 1,000 megawatts or so? The other question, the other answer they give to us is that we should export the power. If indeed the strategy was to sign these PPAs, and when these plants come on stream, they were going to export the power, where is the additional infrastructure support that was needed? The transmission lines are what I'm referring to in this submission. We have managed to ensure that at least the Awazi-Ouagadougou line has been made operational. It was made operational during our tenure. 100 megawatts of electricity is being exported. But we all know that we need to do more in terms of infrastructure if we want to export more power. So they needed to have explained to the people of Ghana that what was the strategy for signing and saddling us with so much debt. They didn't
let's get him to respond to the question about excess capacity, because it's something you addressed at your press conference today.
First of all, I think that Nana Damwa hasn't read the documents. You just quoted hold on. He quoted 2018.
Okay, so you're referring to the question about how the money has been spent.
And then he said that 2018 is an exception. Why haven't we quoted 2017? It's even worse. This is 2017. In the 2017 financial year, only 37% of the utilized ABFA was used for capital expenditure, less than the 70% stipulated in the PRMA. And so, Nana, you are completely off tangent. Please read the documents and stop accusing us wrongly. These are facts that we are putting out. These are incontrovertible facts.
And
let me go to the excess capacity.
Give me a second. I need to take a quick. I want to focus a bit there, and I'll bring you in on excess capacity is key, because you took on the government for suggesting that there's excess capacity and the charges, etc., and there's some burden that has been placed on the government. Another one, please stay with me. When we come back, we'll deal with that quite substantively. Stay with us.
What did
Still live on PM Express. A pretty heated debate whilst we were on break. Nana Damwa is still with me on the phone lines. Nana, you raised an important point about the excess capacity accusations and the rebuttal from the government. I want to quickly get Mr. Jinapor to respond to that. Mr. Jinapor, this is something you touched on your press conference. He says the evidence shows that you saddled this country with huge amounts of debt that we are now struggling to pay.
First of all, I say that is false. You see, myself and Nana Damwa are politicians. We can do a lot of back and forth. ECG, the current managing director, is an NPP member. Go and read his CV. I want to give you. So I'm depending on figures from ECG. It's only ECG that's the off-taker for all these IPPs. No other company.
What does ECG say?
ECG says this, and I just demonstrated to you that this is an ECG document as of November 2019. That the dependable capacity is 3,424. Then the peak demand is 2,781 minus exports, because this is why ECG buys. When you look at the industry, there are two rules of thumb. One,
but there's an excess of 600 megawatts.
So about 200 is exported, so you are dealing with about 400. But let's deal even with the 600. If you take about 2,800, the rule of thumb is that you must have excess capacity of either two. One is that your excess capacity must be equivalent to your biggest installed capacity. Our biggest installed capacity is Akosombo, which is 1,000 megawatts. And so strictly speaking, this country must have a redundancy of 1,000 megawatts sitting, because Akosombo can go down. So that when it goes down, that installed capacity kicks.
That we pay for even though we don't
need it.
You
must pay. That's an insurance. That is why we had Doomso. That is why when Akosomo went down, and out of 1,020 rated megawatts, they were supplying only 300. We had to go through that massive period of Doomso. Do you want that again? Can you accommodate that?
But
it's a decision for us.
But can't you write a contract that says that when I actually begin to use that power, then I pay?
It is not done. And let me tell you why. Take Bui Dam. We spent $790 million to put up Bui Dam. Whether Bui Dam generates power or not, this country has to pay that money.
So is the argument that we don't have excess capacity?
Well, you need that excess capacity.
And we are not paying capacity charges for things we don't need?
You ought to pay capacity charges for that excess capacity. In any country, that's how it is.
Mr. Damwa, what's your reaction?
No, let me just quickly work on that. For the past 4 years, we were increasing access in terms of expansion 4% every year. Just expansion. Under Nana Damwa and the NPP, they are doing 0.5%. Let Nana Damwa debunk that. How can you do 0.5% over 3 years, not even 1%, and then turn around and say that there's excess capacity? Gridco appeared before us with the Minister of Finance. We got funding for Gridco under Agence France de Développement to export about 200 megawatts. By now, we should have been exporting 200 more megawatts to Burkina.
So you say you created a market for your...
We created that market. They don't understand it.
Let me bring it. Nana.
It's a flawed argument. But finally,
forgive me, because
they raised 500 million.
Yes.
And said that they were going to pay excess capacity. Do you know where the money ended? 300 of that money, 300 million, was used to pay Stratcon Energy, a company that was formed by the NPP in 2017. And I'll give you the owners. For fuel, not for excess capacity. Let me hear from you. Nana.
Thank you, sir. Evans, is the argument of John Jinapo that, again, I have a struggle, but then if you would get him to mention the figure that he mentioned for dependable capacity.
3,424 as put up by ECG November 2019.
Is he therefore making the argument that because that is the dependable capacity, all other capacities that are installed, we are not having to pay any charges for them?
That is my argument, that until the power is available, you don't pay capacity charges. Are you arguing over that?
Let him respond
I'm not arguing over that.
So what's your problem?
Argument. This is the argument that we are making. He knows very well. He knows extremely well that they signed power purchase agreements way in excess of what was needed in this country. The argument that they have put forward up until this point has been that, they were not sure how many of those power purchase agreements were going to reach financial closure. So they just signed a lot of them to see which ones were going to be able to reach financial closure. And that those agreements were signed in a period of emergency, Doomso. So they just did it in that haste to ensure that whichever of them was able to reach financial closure came on stream and we got out of Doomso quicker. And I am saying that they should explain to the people of Ghana how that is a good enough strategy. Because you know what? The reality remains that this issue of expansion that he's talking about, in order to save all of us, let's not even argue over expansion and the figures that he's putting out there. But let me tell you how the megawatt, that if all of the 15% Ghanaians who are off stream at the moment, if everybody was brought on stream, how many megawatts would be utilized? Even the figure will shock you, but I want Mr. Jenapo to put out that figure. It will shock you.
What's the figure?
Well, as we speak now, our load as we speak now is 2245.
Okay, what does that mean in the context of the excess capacity debate?
Well, the excess capacity debate, as my brother puts it, is 3,000, as the available capacity is 3,400. So if today, as we speak now, we are generating 2245, we take 2245 from 3,400, there's 1,200 that is available that we are not using.
Is that excess capacity?
Yeah, excess capacity.
Is that within the appropriate?
1,200 is definitely not within appropriate. Okay. Appropriate is 400.
How much of that is available?
All of it's available. Okay. Now, if you look at the document, it says generation available at peak is 3,210.
Okay.
So if we are to go up, they can ranch it up.
Well, listen. This is a conversation that we'll continue about. We have to. Thank you for joining us.
The peak demand is 352.